Hi everybody, it's Andrea Villeneuve and I am so excited to be here with you guys today. What we're going to be making today are two recipes that kind of go together. So we're going to be doing big batch beef, which is a great way to cook in a large amount. You can freeze it and use it for a lot of different recipes, but we're going to be using that big batch beef to make pizza, which I'm pretty sure is pretty much every family's one of their favorite meals. I just want to give you guys a couple of tips. So first things first, whenever you're in the kitchen, you're gonna have to wash your hands. My hands have already been washed, but you need warm water, soap, and you're gonna wash your hands for 20 seconds, making sure you get your thumbs and underneath your fingernails, all of those things. If you have long hair, tie it up. And I'm wearing an apron just to try and keep some of the food off of me, just in case there's any splatter at all. Okay. So this is the start of the big batch beef. I'm gonna turn this to medium-high heat. Okay. And what we're going to be doing right away is we're going to be putting, the big batch beef calls for 4 pounds of beef, okay? So if you don't quite have 4 pounds of beef, that's okay. You could always divide this recipe in half into 2 pounds, and then later, then you can use 2 onions, 2 cloves of garlic. You can always half the recipe if you don't have quite that much beef. I'm going to go ahead and put this right into the pot. Okay, there we go. Because this has to cook for about 8 to 10 minutes, we're cooking it all the way through. A nice little tip for everybody is that whenever you're cooking any kind of ground meat product, what you're gonna wanna do is just remember 71 and done, okay? So what that means is that if you're using a meat thermometer, when you insert it into the meat, there will be a little dimple, so you have to get it at least this far into the meat to read the temperature properly. You want it to be 71 degrees Celsius, means it's completely done, or 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the same temperature, just Celsius and Fahrenheit. Okay, so I'm gonna just set this aside a little, and I'm gonna bring you guys down because I'm gonna show you guys some knife techniques, okay? And how to be safe using knives. As a reminder, when you're dealing with hot things, you're dealing with sharp objects such as knives, it's always great to have a parent around. Please make sure that you have some supervision if you're unsure at all, okay? Here we go. And for this recipe, if you're doing the full big batch beef recipe, you are going to need to cut 4 onions. So you can see here, I already have some cut up, and I just have 1 left. So first things first, when you're cutting on a cutting board, to make sure it doesn't slip at all, I actually put a damp paper towel or cloth underneath here. And that just makes sure that it's really steady, it's not gonna slide out, okay? This is called a chef's knife. So when using a chef's knife, what you wanna do is you never point the sharp end near you, but it's always important to use a very sharp knife. That's the safest thing you can do, is use a sharp knife. So what we are going to do is, first things first, what you always wanna do is make a flat surface as soon as possible, okay? And whenever you're cutting, for the most part, you want to always be making this claw shape you see right here, okay? So basically this claw shape is protecting your fingers. So if you see here, I can cut really close, making sure you always leave the tip of the knife on the cutting board. But all of your hands are protected, including, all your fingers are protected, including your thumb. Everything's tucked. And that way, you know that you're keeping your fingers safe. This is what you're not supposed to do, okay? That is not safe. So you want to make sure that you are tucking your fingers, okay? So let's get going. So also, whenever you're doing something round, for example, this onion, round, this isn't exactly the most steady thing. The very first thing you want to do is cut it right in half, and that way you have a steady surface to cut from. So you cut it in half, And then you can cut off the ends. And then it just makes it also easier to take the skins off of the onion. So that's kind of what we're going for here. And then also, as you are dealing with kitchen scraps, a great option is to kind of just set them aside into a waste bowl if you can't put them into the green bin right away or anything like that. Okay, so we're just going on with our regular technique, cutting the ends off. Taking the skin off. And I'm just going to actually take you to a quick little side note. As you can see, the beef is cooking away. So I'm just going to take a quick minute and I'm going to stir the beef, and then we'll get back to the cutting. Okay, so we're going to keep on with our prepping here, seeing down to the onions. And so this, I want you guys to practice this. Basically keeping your fingers tucked and making those slices, just like so. Go at your own pace, because that is the safest thing to do. And then I want to teach you guys another really safe knife cutting technique, and that is you leave the tip of the knife on the board at all times, and you're just cutting with the back of the knife, and you do this. Okay, this is called chopping, and it's great because it'll just give you a rough chop, but it's an easy way to kind of get everything into a smaller, more manageable size. And it can be pretty quick because your fingers are safe and nowhere near the tip of the blade. So it's a really fast way to cut. And get the onions, especially because we're doing 4 different onions in this recipe, that's a lot of potential for you to start tearing up. So it's good if you can just chop through it kind of quickly. If you do find that you're going to start tearing up, I know a lot of different techniques. Some people put onions underneath some cold water, and they say that that prevents them from crying when they're chopping large amounts of onions. They also have these sort of goggles that you can wear, and that'll just basically help protect your eyes at the end of the day. Okay, so heading back over to the beef. I'm gonna stir it up a little more. It's not quite done. So we're stirring it up. I can still see some pink, so I know that it's not fully cooked. That is an indicator of ground meat being cooked, is that it's all brown, there's no more pink remaining, okay? You do want to make sure that you're cooking it completely. And then if you want it to be extra safe, you can use a meat thermometer. As mentioned, 71, and your hamburger is done, okay? Not only is a meat thermometer a good tool for food safety, it's also a really good tool if you are trying to get the best results. You want to make sure your meat isn't too dry, that it's still moist and juicy, then you definitely want to use a meat thermometer. Okay, so this is well stirred, and I would say that it's almost done. I'll just give you guys another peek inside. See, it's cooking away, and you can see that almost no pink is remaining. There's still a little bit there. Okay, here we go. So I already have some garlic already chopped up, about 2 cloves there. And then so I have 2 more cloves of garlic right here that we can use. So basically these skins can get so sticky and it's really hard to break them off. So what I actually like to do is just cut off this little end right here, sort of like the hard bit end. And then I like to crush it. I normally do crush it using my knife. But if you're not comfortable with that, you don't have a lot of knife experience yet, you can just take a cup and crush it like that. And then that makes it 10 times easier to actually peel off the skin that you see. So that's one of my tips. Also on top of it, I do like crushing my garlic before I use it because it helps release the juices in it to help get even more of that garlic flavor in the dish. So that's a huge bonus. I'm a huge garlic fan. Don't know about you guys at home, but feel like onions and garlic pretty much add just so much flavor to anything. So as you can see, I am, once again, tucking my fingers, making my cuts, leaving the tip of the knife on the board. And yes, everything's tucked behind. Or if you don't feel comfortable with that, with such a small item, you didn't even have to do it that way. You can always do the other method that I taught you, where you just do this and you're chopping it through, right? This hand makes sure that the tip stays on the board and you're just cutting with the back of the knife. And this is also a nice method because you can make it very, very small. This is how you mince. This is how, as a chef, you mince things. And you can see that it's like a very fast method. Okay. So this seems like it is perfect timing because the beef is definitely sizzling away. You can see from the color, like it's no longer pink. Oh, actually, there's a hint of pink there still. Gotta stir it again. Just to make sure it is fully cooked. And just breaking it apart too as I go. So making sure that it's into the size chunks that we're looking for. There we go. And also, if you want to check ground beef, what you can always do is when you're using the meat thermometer, what you basically want to do is kind of tilt this to the side. And you want to kind of have all of the beef together so that it's kind of making a pile, basically. Because that's the thing. There's no sort of center that you can really stick this into, right? So it's more so about trying to aim for the center and making sure you don't get too close to the sides of the pan because those are obviously going to be much hotter than the actual beef itself. Okay, and we are definitely, this beef is fully cooked. Over 71 right now. So we're ready to go. So the next step in the big batch beef that we are going to do is drain it. So I'll kind of do that here so you guys can take a look. There we go. Kind of have a bowl here. And I will just kind of do this. So you can see there's not much liquid there. There we go. And I'll just set that aside. So basically, I really don't like to waste anything in my own kitchen. So what I do like to do when you drain something, like this is mostly just juices and flavor and all that delicious stuff. So you can either save it and make for like a stock, put it in some sort of beef soup as an additional flavor, or another good thing that you could do with it is you can make it into a gravy for another meal. So I'm just going to set this aside. Okay, so now that we've drained, I'm going to add in the garlic as well as the onions that we just chopped up. So that's going to go right in here. There we go. And then the garlic, but I know that there was a lot of chopping to do. So I will also, I had my additional, sorry, that's kind of Can't really see that super well, but these are onions, onions, more flavor. And we're also gonna have the additional 2 cloves of garlic right there. There we go. Everything's in there. Give it a nice stir. And we're gonna cook this for about, probably about 6 to 8 minutes longer. You just kind of want, basically, the onions to soften. Here we go. So we're just gonna let that cook. Okay. So while that's cooking, and that is, for the most part, the actual physical recipe of the big batch beef. So you can see just how easy it is. I'm gonna show you guys a little bit later in the lesson how to freeze it so that you can use it for all kinds of different meals. It's so great, so versatile, and it's really nice to just have it on hand in pre-portioned containers, just so that it's like you grab it from the freezer and just, as mentioned before, you can put it in soups, salads. Really, the sky's the limit. Spaghetti, tacos, anything you really are feeling like. So now that big batch beef is closer to getting done, I just want to take you guys over to the oven because we're going to preheat the oven. So I'm going to do bake at 425, start, and that is going to be for the pizza, which we're going to get started making right now. So the best part about a pizza is that it can really be whatever you want it to be. I have a base right here, and it is actually, so it's round right here, and I'm gonna put it on a baking sheet. But I wanted to talk for a little second about this because I personally picked a whole wheat pizza base. Really what it comes down to is that from a nutrition standpoint, you should try and pick at least 50% of the carbohydrates that you eat should be whole wheat. I realize that not everybody likes whole wheat. So basically what I want to try and encourage everybody at home to do is if you think it's a meal where a whole wheat pizza crust, for example, or whole wheat bread might be okay, you think it might taste good, I'm encouraging you to try it. And basically over time, you'll figure out which recipes you're like, oh yeah, I can use whole wheat naan bread, or oh yes, I can use brown rice, for example, over white rice. You'll get sort of a feeling for what kind of textures you're okay with in certain foods. So right here, we have our pizza crust. And then what you're going to do is take a little bit of this right here, which is tomato sauce. You can buy pizza sauce. You can buy pasta sauce from a can. It all works. And we're just going to spread it evenly over the pizza crust right now. There we go. So tomato sauce is just so nice and rich, such a great flavor. Obviously, you can also experiment with different flavors like a pesto. There's just so much that you can do with a pizza. As mentioned, it's so versatile. Okay, so that's on. Just moving over. So next steps in the pizza, I'm going to be cutting up some ingredients that I love for pizza to put on top of my pizza. But really, the sky's the limit with pizza. You can put whatever you like on your pizza. We're going to be putting some beef on it today, some cheese, some basil, tomatoes, and even some peppers. So we'll be putting that on the pizza today. But if you want to use traditional meats on your pizza, you can do that, like pepperonis and that kind of thing. You don't have to put any meat on your pizza if you're not into that. So really, the sky is the absolute limit. The advantage with using a ground meat product like ground beef is that really, at the end of the day, it just has less salt and it's less processed than your typical pepperoni or that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to get going and we'll start chopping some of these delicious toppings, okay? And I'll be giving some more tips on those toppings as well. Well, sorry, cutting up these toppings. So we're gonna be putting some tomatoes on it. They're cute little grape tomatoes. So basically, cute little grape tomatoes are full of vitamin C. And they have quite a bit of fiber in them as well, so they're great that way. And you can cut them either way you want. You can cut them so that they're little rounds, which is kind of cute, or you can just cut them in half, like that. I think I'm going to go with just cutting them in half. But you just really want to make the pizza as colorful, really, as you can. Kind of wondering what you guys have as your favorite pizza toppings out there. And I know that sometimes you're not sure about a certain food, but pizza is a great way to try a new food. Just because it's like you'll just have a little bit of it. If you, for example, maybe you're not a huge fan of green peppers, which is what I will be putting on my pizza today. But if you're not a huge fan of green peppers, what you can do is just put them on like a quarter or half of your pizza. And that way you can try it and just see if you like it. So we have our tomatoes ready. I have some basil over here. It's already been washed. And I'm just going to do, I kind of like to sort of roll it up a little bit. And then do the claw again. And you just kind of, and it's kind of nice. This is what you would call a chiffon in the culinary world. So when you see those like kind of thin strips, that's a chiffon. That's a technical cutting term, in case you didn't know. And I'll just put that aside. I'm just gonna kind of get the pizza fully together here. So pepper, just want a little bit of pepper, you can just put this aside. We're doing this. And then you can clump them all together and run the knife through them the other way. And then you have a nice small dices right there. Okay? So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start dressing up the pizza. So what we're going to do is I have a cup here, and I'm going to take a cup of the ground beef. So this is the big batch beef that we're going to be putting onto the pizza right here. And we can just sprinkle that on. Yum. And what the beef adds is protein, which I think everyone's pretty familiar with, which helps you obviously with basically muscles and staying strong, all of those things. But it also has vitamin B12 in it as well, which helps with basically your nerve cells as well as your blood cells. So that's really important because vitamin B12 is only found in animal-based products. We're sprinkling over the basil. Basil is considered a fresh herb. And what I really like about basil is that it's basically any herb adds a lot of flavor without adding a lot of additional fat or additional salt. So it's really a powerhouse of basically flavor that you can add to any dish. Okay, we have our tomatoes on. Green peppers. There we go, just putting everything on. Green peppers, also high in fiber. And vitamin C as well. There's a lot of, this is kind of a protein rich and a vitamin C rich pizza right here. And I will just do a tiny bit of red onion as well, just to add that extra pop of color, and then you know we're getting like a full rainbow type situation. There we go. So basically if you want strips, what I would recommend, instead of a dice, just cut it down the middle, and they won't be quite as long. And then you tuck your hands again, and you just kind of run it through. There you go. And that's how you get those sort of beautiful onion pieces that are more, they're not diced. They are just cute little kind of, not full rings, but you're getting there, right? Depends how much you like onion right now to be how big you want the pieces to be. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we have our onion, we have everything else on there. Just setting this aside. This was the towel, keeping everything set in place. Okay, and then I'm just gonna, of course, the piece de resistance, we're going to be adding cheese to our pizza. So here we go, just shredding it. This is mozzarella that I'm using, but really you can use whatever kind of cheese you want to. Basically something that is a skill that I think is really overlooked is the fact that if you can look into your fridge and see a whole bunch of different ingredients and come up with a meal from just what's in your fridge, that is a huge life skill and something that does take time to build, but it is great to have, so that basically you don't have to run out grocery shopping, or you don't have to feel the need to order in as much. So really whatever cheese, for the most part, will work on top of pizza. So I'm using pizza mozzarella, but in the actual recipe that we're following along with, they use provolone. But if you have like marble cheddar at home or just regular orange cheddar, feel free to use that. It's really whatever you want it to be. So, and that's always the funnest part about pizza, whatever you want it to be. Okay, so just gonna sprinkle this on to the pizza. It's about a cup of cheese. And you just want to make sure that it's kind of spread out all the way to the edges. And also cheese contributes a lot of, it's protein rich and really delicious as well. So it's another protein rich product right here. And also, as always, dairy products add calcium as well into the mix. There we go. So you can see we have a delicious looking pizza, and I'm going to just pop it into the oven right now, and it's going to be for about 15 minutes. The goal is to just basically crisp up the pizza. That's the main goal right there. So I'm just going to pop it in. And I'll put the timer on for 15 minutes. And once again, that was at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for the oven. Okay? So this is just bonus material from here on out, okay? So what I'm going to show you guys is that we cooked all this big batch beef. I'm sure you noticed that we didn't use all of the beef on the pizza, right? So basically what we're going to do for big batch beef pizza, it's perfect if you want to save it for later. For all of those other delicious meals that we talked about, like tacos, spaghetti, anything along those lines. So what I'm going to do is spread out the beef on this parchment-lined baking tray. And we're just going to toss it into the freezer. So you want to make sure that it's kind of in a single layer. Spreading it out. And really, you might be thinking, why aren't you just putting it into the containers right away and letting it freeze? But that is how you get a big solid chunk of cooked beef. So whereas if you freeze it for about an hour on this pan, then everything won't stick together in one big clump. It'll all kind of freeze like on its own, so that you can it makes it easier to scoop it out later. And easier to reheat as well, because you're not trying to reheat all the way to a center of a block, basically. Okay, so you see this right here. And then what I would do, take it over to the freezer and let it be in the freezer for 1 hour. And then when it comes out, I don't have any pre-made, but I'll show you guys basically what happens. So it will kind of stick to the bottom of the pan a bit, so you might have to use a spoon to kind of like push it off so that it's not sticking to the bottom of the pan. Kind of break it up. And what you're going to do is use some of my absolute favorite things in the world is these reusable glass containers. They're refrigerator safe and they're microwavable safe as well. So basically what you can do, you just put the beef into these containers in the portions you want. So a cup, for example, is a really good example. That's what we just put on that pizza right there. Depending on the size of your family, if you're going to be cooking for your whole family, you might want to have 2 cups of beef per serving if you know you're going to be cooking for the whole family. Okay, so I'll just point you guys down. So basically, we would be breaking up the beef with our spoon and putting it right in here. And this is the perfect way to do things as well, just because during the week when things get very busy, a huge point for basically healthy eating is to prepare everything in advance. The more of your meals you have planned out in advance, and the more sort of pre-prep you have done, like making big batch beef, the more likely you are to stay at home and eat instead of ordering out. Then you can see I just put the lid on and it is airtight. I just let a little bit of the air out of there, right there. And then something else, so then you put this in the freezer. But the important part is that it can last for up to 3 months. So that's a huge advantage because then for 3 months you can basically have frozen beef ready to go for whatever meal you're planning on eating. Another tip with freezing, so you know, is actually, before you put it in the freezer, to label it. So it helps if you basically, what I'm going to do right here is it's actually painter's tape because I know that it doesn't stick too hard to anything. And you just want to basically put the date on it. So you can either say like, okay, so I made this on July 7th. And then you know that 3 months from now, that is basically when you have to eat it by. Plenty of time, but it's also nice to know just in case it gets lost in the freezer or anything along those lines. So yeah, you just pop that right in the freezer. Just grabbing my oven mitt right here. And yeah, it looks pretty good. If you like a crispier crust, you can obviously leave it in longer. But it looks pretty good to me. There we go, we have it out. That is a pizza, right? So I do not happen to have a pizza cutter, but I always like to say to anybody, if you don't have a tool, a specific tool mentioned, there's always a workaround for that. So one of the things that I would like to say, for example, is that you don't need a pizza cutter. You can use a knife. If you let the pizza cool down as well, you can use scissors. If you're not completely comfortable with using knives, I meant to mention earlier, scissors are great. You want to make sure that you do pop them in the dishwasher and that they're properly cleaned and used as kitchen scissors. I'm going to use our knife, our handy chef's knife to cut the pizza up. There we go, you guys can see it. You just kind of put it through. There we go. Being careful because everything's hot, but there you go. And then you can cut it into eighths or whatever you're feeling like. All with a knife or a pizza cutter if you happen to have one.